welcome Professor Chilengi. It is lovely to have you back.
Thank you, Dr. Anjali. It's a pleasure to be here.
We have been very impressed with the progress made with the vaccination drive. And we are quite convinced that quite a few insiders have been vaccinated. But I think it's time to understand and regroup with all the new developments about what's happening with vaccines and boosters and what the future looks like. So I'll let Michelo voice our first question.
Right. So I think the most critical question that people have in light of the successful rollout now from the relaunch is, what is a booster dose, and maybe why do we need it? I think if we can begin from there, that might be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Michelo. I think that's a really important question, and many people across the country want to know, what is this booster? And I think to answer that question, we have to step back a little and let people understand that the vaccines that we have in this country at the moment for COVID-19 are 5. One is called AstraZeneca, the other one is called Sinopharm, then we have Johnson & Johnson, and lately we had Moderna and Pfizer. All these vaccines are brought in because they are effective against coronavirus disease. And I want to be very clear, they are very effective against preventing severe disease and death from coronavirus. Now that is different than people expect, because before I get to your point, the other issue is, how come even if you are vaccinated, you still get an infection? So vaccines work inside the body. They prepare the body to fight the disease when they come across it. So no wonder when you are vaccinated, the effect of the vaccine is circulating inside your body. When you go for a COVID test, they are getting a swab outside of the inside. So in many respects, if you are feeling well, you are vaccinated, and you test positive, you can almost argue that in fact the vaccine is keeping that infection at bay. So that ability of the vaccine to keep the infection at bay is what you call efficacy, actually. And coming to your question now, the vaccines against coronavirus are new vaccines. I think we all know that. Possibly the longest used vaccine only has been used in human beings for just over a year now. And I think we were very clear that this is a new disease, these are new vaccines. And therefore, in terms of how long that protective effect lasts is a question to be answered. The vaccines were developed and clinical trials done at the height of the epidemic. And in that period, it was very obvious and easy to show that people who are vaccinated are protected. Now, as you know, the COVID outbreaks, the epidemics rise very quickly, then they go down. And so in that period, it has been very easy to show that the vaccines are actually protecting against the epidemic. Okay?
Yeah.
And then comes now what happens with the beta wave, with the delta wave, and the Omicron wave. That's now people are vaccinated and you are going in time. So that ability to keep you protected, which the vaccine gives to the inside of your body, is perhaps what you call immunity. And what you call immunity is driven by living cells. And these cells, just like your red blood cells, they have to keep being stimulated and made. Otherwise, they have a lifespan of a few months. And so, once you are fully vaccinated, you are well protected. After a period of time, those cells begin to get tired and get cleared out. the technical term we say for that is waning or reducing of immunity. Now you can only study long-term immunity in the period that you've had the vaccine. And I want to be very clear that we just had these vaccines now.
Yeah.
So we are growing with the vaccine in time.
Yeah.
And what the people must be comfortable with is the fact that as scientists, we've always said we'll give you information as we have it. If it protects, we'll tell you it is protecting. And when we begin to see that the immunity is going down, we are afraid. And this is where the subject of the booster is very important. Why are we afraid? Because what you call natural immunity, while it can give you some protection if you survive it, it's a very poor teacher of the immune response. When we make vaccines, vaccines are engineered to expose the body only to what we call functional epitopes in the metabolism of the virus, so that you are targeted. While natural infection exposes you to the entire genome of the virus, and that is a risky business. Because while we know that if you survive it, you can gain some immunity, we don't know that you will survive it. This is how we've lost people, because they got the infection, 2 people get the infection, 1 dies, the other survives. The determinants of that are very complicated. And this is why, as scientists, we think it is too risky at the moment to leave immunity to nature, because while nature is teaching us, it will kill our people. So we have the opportunity to give them these vaccines so that we survive them through that outbreak peak. And what you call a booster, therefore, is an injection of the vaccine at a point when we begin to see that those immune responses are going down. So you give a shot so that those immune responses go up, and then we are assured of, in the event of an outbreak, that you are protected. The real question is how long you remain protected. And the answer, remember previously we said we don't know. But now we know that for your 2-dose regimen vaccines, like your Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, that this immunity will be there 5-6 months, half a year more or less. And this is why we are saying get another shot to lift up those responses. Unfortunately, for the single shot, Johnson & Johnson, while in the period you get it, you get very good responses, but they go down very quickly. And this is why for Johnson & Johnson, we are saying by the time you do 2 months, your responses have already started to go down. You need another shot so that you pick those up. So what we call a booster, in layman terms, the best example I can use is your battery, your phone battery. When you fully charge it, how long does it remain? Again, it depends on the type of phone or the type of battery.
And the usage.
And the usage. But what we see is that in time, that life or strength of the battery starts to go down. It is the same charge that you plug it into the electricity to what? To boost the power. And once you've boosted, it gives you another lifespan, and that is again not guaranteed. Depending on how you use it, it might stay 3-4 days, it might just stay a few hours, depending on the type of the battery, depending on the usage. So the concept of a booster is exactly the same. The power is going low, you put something in so that it goes up, then you are sure that it will carry you through this period. Which period? We are still studying. Remember, in the primary series, now we have the answer. We know if you got a single shot, 2 to 3 months. If you had a double dose, it is 5-6 months. Okay? Now when you've received a booster shot, we are going forward. Remember, we just started with this vaccine, so we don't know for sure whether after another 6 months it will go down or it will remain high. We don't know. And this is why research must continue. For sure, if there will be evidence that it is going down, then the conversation of further boosters will come. But if it remains high, then we continue to monitor. So this is the best layman's explanation I can give about the booster.
Yeah. So thank you very much for that very nice layman explanation of what a booster dose is. What would you say to people who would say, well, because I've already been primed by 2 doses, therefore why can't I, be boosted by a natural infection?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And there are 2 things. Remember, first in my response, I say that natural infection is a very poor teacher of the immune system. Because in the process of teaching the immune system, sometimes you have bad outcomes like severe disease or even death. That's what we are afraid of, and that's a risk we are not willing to take. But in the way vaccines are designed to work, they are designed literally to mimic natural infection and train the body. So there is a concept of what you call memory, immune memory. So as we vaccinate, as we get exposure to natural infection, there is some memory being created within the person exposed. And when either you meet the vaccine stimulants or the natural infection, that memory is also stimulated. We truly at the moment don't know to what extent that stimulation will happen and how quickly that will happen in lieu of exposure of a person who's primed either by previous infection or vaccination. For sure, what we see is that when you get either natural infection or a booster shot, the immune responses go up. What we are not sure of is whether the 2 primary series for the double dose infection or a single dose is good enough to risk exposure to natural infection.
Right.
We're not sure about that. Yeah. And I don't think it's an experiment that we will learn, because there are many people who will go through that. But objectively, it is something that we are following very closely to try and see what comes out of that. But at the moment, the thinking is that it is too risky to leave it to natural infection. Why do I say that? In other diseases, we know that you suffer it once, you are immune forever. We already know that coronavirus is not one of those because we have many people, in 2 years they've already had 2-3 episodes. So that already tells you. And remember, we've not been mass screening and just testing people. People have usually gone for testing after they have symptoms. So meaning, despite having been vaccinated or having had the disease before, they will still get exposed and have symptoms. That's the fear. Because in people who are at high risk, i.e. your diabetics, your hypertensive, and other chronic conditions, that might be enough to send them to severe disease. That's really what we are worried about, and that's why it is still very important at this point to make sure that you get a booster and you sail through the period that the booster gives you protection. And I think that the more exposures you have, of course, the stronger the immunity is going to be in time. The question that will arise is, of course, how many boosters are going to be good enough? And unfortunately, this is one question, at least to the best of my knowledge, I'm not able to answer. Because as I said, we are studying immunity in time as we go. So we really don't have an answer to that. I sure hope it will be a situation that once the immune system is stimulated enough times, it becomes hypercharged and it can deal with issues moving forward. But right now, we don't have the evidence for that.
Thank you.
So looking at the schedule for the boosters, it looks like Pfizer and Moderna are the preferred vaccines or for the booster shot. Why is that? Why is it okay to mix? Like I had AZ and now I should go for Pfizer or Moderna.
I think when you say you should go for Pfizer or Moderna is not exactly correct.
Okay.
You can actually boost with the same vaccine. What the concept of mixing vaccines is that when you are given a primary series by one vaccine, because these vaccines have some variations in the way they are manufactured. The important thing to note is that they all target the spike protein of the coronavirus. And so, regardless of what you had, the spike protein antigen is the same, so that stimulation will still happen. But what we do know is that the concept of what we call viral vector vaccines, which in this case is your AstraZeneca, is your Johnson & Johnson. In other words, the way they are engineered, the antigen is stimulated in a chimpanzee adenovirus. And that's what's given in the injection, so that then it generates the spike protein exposed to the body. Unlike your Moderna and Pfizer, for which you have these targeted proteins, spike proteins delivered on nanoparticles. So when you give a viral vectored vaccine, there is a stronger T-cell response, which is known, and this is not just for coronavirus vaccines. This is a known fact, and we use these types of vaccines for other diseases as well. So when you stimulate that with a direct protein, you get a stronger response. So if you were getting a booster up to this much with Pfizer, when you use the same antigen, you will get a booster, but it may be slightly lower. And that's the advantage of mixing the vaccines. So it is very important to note that the best vaccine that you need to get is a vaccine available to you. The vaccine that gets in your body. Because sometimes we know people get to the facility and they find, the Pfizer has run out, or there's no Pfizer. No, me, I've been told it's the best. It's only good when it's in your body.
Yes.
If it's not in your body, we can debate any,
Yes.
But all these vaccines have protective benefits, and I think that you need to access them as soon as they are available to you.
So you said the protein spike is the same, but does it change with each variant of the coronavirus?
I think that's an important question, Anjali. Again, it must take us to the basics of vaccinology. The vaccine works under a theory we call key and lock mechanism. So for every lock, there's only a specific key that can open it. And in this case, if the lock is the protein from the pathogen, the key is the antibodies that the immune system stimulates. So the vaccines that we are talking about, in the way they are engineered, remember we say the coronavirus is a big genome, and then in its structure it has these spikes. And those spikes have proteins that are responsible for attachment to the human cell. That's a famous spike protein. So the spike protein is responsible for attachment to the human cell so that the virus enters and begins to multiply. And so the vaccines targeting, if the spike protein is the lock, the antibodies from the vaccine are the key. So unlock the spike protein, essentially. And the source of these proteins in biochemistry, it doesn't matter. It is a sequence of amino acids. So whether it came from your Sinopharm or your AstraZeneca, as long as the sequence of those amino acids is the sequence that represents the spike protein, that key will identify it to unlock. And this is why it is very important. Now, I think the important question you ask is, are all the new variants going to use that mechanism? Again, we don't know. For sure, for now, we know that all these variants we've seen in Alpha, Beta, Delta, Omicron, they've all depended on the spike protein for attachment, and therefore the vaccines work. Now, we cannot guarantee that all the future variants will use that mechanism. Remember, the concept of mutation is driven by survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
So while we are trying to survive as human species, the viruses are also trying to find ways to improve themselves and survive. The solution to that problem for coronavirus, at least, is a time when we achieve zero transmission, zero multiplication. Okay? But as long as we have even 0.1, 0.2% positivity, it means that the viruses are multiplying within our human bodies, and the chances of a mutation happening and a new variant coming up is always there. Okay, so when we will see that there are talks about new vaccines in the future, it simply means that the lock is being studied well in the sense of the proteins, the functional proteins on those new variants, and you perhaps prepare more specific keys that will open that. But in a very general sense, the vaccines that are targeting the spike protein are very effective against all these variants we have to date.
So what you said is important, that the virus also needs to live. Now, if I was a virus, I would make sure I don't kill you so I can live.
Yes.
So over time, I should become less and less virulent. So is there a point where vaccines and boosters really don't make any sense?
In theory, yes. In theory, there is that point. But remember, viral multiplication and generation of new variants is really very much like us human species. If I'm married to you and we start having children, our first child might look like you. The second one might look like me. And then the third might be in between. And in terms of characteristics of those children, it will really depend. Some of them may be athletic, others may be academic, more intelligent in class, others may be completely dull. And that probability is random. So we really don't know what will come out. And so we can just observe as they emerge. But the sure way to stop those offsprings coming up is if the two of us stop producing them. So the variant story is the same. If we can bring to zero transmission of the virus, then we can forget about new variants having different characteristics. And this we've done before with other viral infections. I think the biggest one is the story of smallpox, which was worse than corona. We are almost in that space with your polio, for example, where we pretty much, there are some still small things that come up. But this is what vaccines can help us with. Bring to near zero the transmission, then the probability of variants surprising us is reduced. This is why we keep insisting that you have to mask up, do what you can to break that transmission, even when we know it's very hard to bring it to zero. But that's the target. Yeah. That's the target. And this is why we also encourage as many people to be vaccinated, because we know the vaccine is pushing us along very far in limiting how quickly these viruses multiply. And the famous term of herd immunity is actually driven by this concept that in a population, if you are going to vaccinate a good proportion, i.e. 70%, the virus doesn't have the freedom to keep multiplying in that population. There is herd protection. And as there is herd protection, there is less disease, there's less transmission, and therefore new things coming up are also reduced. I keep saying that there are two benefits from vaccination. One is to the individual. To the individual, you are getting protected against severe disease and death. Very important. To the community, to my neighbors and the community, we reduce transmission. And if we tackle both things, then we move further along that desired outcome.
So that leads me to two questions. One, if you are vaccinated and I'm vaccinated, why are we wearing masks? And two, our offsprings, must we vaccinate them?
Very important questions, but I think we need to separate them.
Yes.
One is, why are we wearing masks?
Yeah.
Remember, two reasons. Number one, there is no such a thing as a vaccine that is 100% protective. We've never ever said that. We're saying the probability of you having severe disease and death is significantly reduced. So there's that probability. Because you are vaccinated, you don't have to expose yourself to dangerous things.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one. But most importantly, because we are vaccinated, we are able to handle an infection in our airways, even without feeling sick, because we are protected ourselves. But then the next person on the street, our grandmother at home, our relatives, and everybody else we come in contact with may not be protected. Worse still, they might have the risk factor. So you've done your job getting yourself protected, but you can be a carrier too. So when you are wearing this, basically, Dr. Sharma, this is how it works. When I'm carrying coronavirus infection, every time I breathe, as I talk, it's millions of virions coming out. Because I'm wearing this, it kind of immediately holds us. So even if a few escape, you reduce what goes out there. That's number one. But number two, if we go back to your issue of our offspring, remember, viral replication is different combinations of genes, of these mutants as they go on. And this is very true with other people on treatment. For example, you are on HIV treatment, it's the same characteristic. You don't want to mix simply because you are on antiretroviral therapy and you have a low viral load. You don't want to continue to expose yourself to other viruses. Same. I am protected, I may carry some virus. We should not give these viruses a chance to mix. Because as they mix, you might just end up with a stronger one that beats the protections that we have. So these are the reasons why we must still keep this thing on. And I don't think anybody likes the idea of wearing masks. It makes us look like zombies. It's the limitation of medical science. It's the best we have. Wear the mask, sanitize, vaccinate. That's what we have. And if there was a better solution, we would use it. But for now, the basic science of it dictates that even when you are vaccinated, you are not 100% protected, and you are still a danger to your grandmother at home. Yeah.
And then you asked the question of the children. Why do we need to vaccinate them? Yes.
Or why don't we vaccinate them?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's another important question. So when we have vaccines in development, and you and I have been doing vaccine trials forever, we know that when you are first introducing a vaccine, you start in healthy adults. And once you show that it is safe, efficacious, then you start going to other categories of the population. And this is exactly what happened with the COVID vaccine. We first were saying it is safe for healthy adults. And this coincided with another factor in reality, because we saw that when the vaccines came up, there were limited global supplies. So obviously in that space you have to prioritize. Who do you give to? You have 1,000 people, you only have 200 vaccines. Who do you give it to? You look around, you say, okay, who is most at risk? So we noticed that with coronavirus disease, it was much more severe in adults, much more those who had comorbid conditions, diabetes, hypertension, chronic diseases like heart disease, etc., which unfortunately is the category of our population who are parents and the workforce.
Yeah.
So if those are hit, there will be no one to look after the children.
Yeah.
If you start with the children and protect them, and then their parents are dead, you have a bigger problem on your hands. So that was very much the thinking in focusing on adults. Before we knew it, a lot of our female friends were already pregnant and conceiving while they are vaccinated. Once we had enough data to see that the outcomes of those pregnancies are okay, and concluded that pregnant women are okay, went on to lactating mothers okay, and other trials now to say, look, because children are also not exempt, except for reasons we don't know very well. The children did exhibit relatively mild disease than adults. But the important thing with infectious diseases is not only the severity of the disease it causes, it's the effectiveness of the spread. We know that children would harbor viruses that were very potent when spread
To adults.
to others. So while they were clinically not that hit, but they would be effective reservoirs for spread of the virus. So then they are equally an important age group to target. But safety is very important, so you have to now do specific safety and efficacy studies in the population. And there's a standard terminology we use in clinical trials. We call it age de-escalation studies. You start with the adults, then you keep reducing the ages until you get to a point where you reach even newborns and infants.
Yeah.
But we normally do that stepwise. Can you imagine with all the talk that is there for coronavirus vaccines, if we started with infants? you wouldn't vaccinate anyone.
No.
It's just not the way we do this science.
Yeah.
And so there's already evidence showing that the vaccines are safe, and in children, younger children. In other places, they are vaccinating down to 5 years.
Yes, yeah.
You heard us announce in Zambia that from 12 years up, we are vaccinating. Well, that is also very important, because when we started to vaccinate, the question was, why are you just bringing these things? There are technical committees in our country that look at the data, that look at what's happening, evaluate. Only when they are convinced that this is good enough and safe enough, does that translate into policy. So far, we are saying we are happy with the Pfizer vaccine, its safety and efficacy in younger children. And we have done the logistical preparations to bring it to the age down to 12.
Right.
That does not mean the other vaccines are bad. No, it doesn't. It just means that we are still looking at evidence for their safety and efficacy and the logistical implications, cost, etc. To be used. So we will only make recommendations based on where we have enough information that convinces us. We are not doing this because the Americans are done now. No.
Yeah.
We are doing this because we know we need it, and we are convinced that it is safe and doable in our space.
Right.
I think that is very important to assure the public that we don't just jump at everything.
Yeah.
We take our time to make decisions when we are convinced.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm very conscious of the time and we want people to ask questions and answers, but I have one last question. Is there anybody who should not vaccinate?
Anybody who should not vaccinate, I will say yes, there is. That is the patient who, at the time they have the opportunity to vaccinate, they either have symptoms of coronavirus disease itself, or they have other debilitating conditions that makes vaccination unsafe for them. Remember, when we vaccinate, it's not water that we are giving you. We are giving you something to shake your system up,
Yes.
which is why sometimes people get,
You know,
some of them get quite sick.
high fever.
Exactly. So you don't want that process to tip somebody off, in which case you will now say the vaccine has killed a person. Vaccines are given to healthy people. Vaccines are for prevention and not cure. And this is why we say to people, get vaccinated now. Because when you get symptoms, you will then be told, no, wait until you have recovered. Yeah. So the one who is sick and unwell is the person who must not be vaccinated at that point. I think they need to be treated. When they have settled down, then they can get vaccinated.
So illness meaning like an acute illness, because if I have diabetes or hypertension, I can still be vaccinated.
Absolutely. We mean acute symptomatic illness. Even then, that must be determined by your healthcare provider. But if you have other underlying conditions like diabetes, hypertension, in fact, when you are stable, you are the person that must be vaccinated. Because if you get this thing, it takes you to the grave fast.
Well, thank you so much. We've learned a lot, and I know that even with insiders we have a lot of questions and concerns, and mostly also how do we talk to others and be confident about what we are saying. So it's been very useful to hear from you directly.
It is a pleasure and happy to engage and chat some more, but I think unfortunately this is a struggle that we all have a part to play. And I think if we choose not to play that part, we create weak links, and so this thing will continue to ravage us. But I hope that each one of us can take responsibility, and we can make sure that we do something about the COVID situation, especially vaccinating.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.